Thanks for asking me to be a part of your PLT time this afternoon. I am excited to see that the Social Studies and English departments want to collaborate on a cross-curricular unit in teaching the Civil Rights Movement. Not only do you want to combine teaching some social studies with English, but you want to work with two different age groups, freshmen and sophomores. You want to work with English 1 and U.S. history. I know that this can be quite an undertaking, but I am here to help you with a plethora of resources and my desire to make sure you are successful. One of my roles for you in this project is to offer resources that we have in and outside of the library. I'm also here for collaboration. I'm here to help you plan your lessons, come up with different ideas for projects, and to help you with this new concept and to show the students why it's important to understand the Civil Rights Movement. I'm also here because I would love to be able to work with you in teaching some research and information literacy skills so that I can help the students become much better and increase your standards as well as mine. First, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the importance of teaching the Civil Rights Movement. One, we should teach it because it is relevant, engaging, current, and real world. Given our recent history and the race and religion questions that are an important part of this country's conversation, I think that you have found something that students can relate to, be engaged in, and find relevant. These are key concepts in trying to engage students in learning, especially when you're talking about events that happened in history, because they don't feel like it has anything to do with them, since it is history. It is our job to help them see that we need to understand history so that we don't make the same mistakes. We need to learn and change, and I think that this is a great start. We also need to show students how the protests and movements that are happening today are very similar to what happened in the 50s and 60s. Things like Black Lives Matter and the Dakota Access Pipeline are necessary in order to bring about change in our country. When I was looking at some resources, I found this quote, and I thought it might be important, and you could even use it with your classroom and with your students. Feel free to copy and paste as you feel necessary. This topic is such an important component to understand in our history. Many of you may be familiar with teaching tolerance, but the parent organization, Southern Poverty Law Center, conducted two studies, one in 2011 and one in 2014, looking at how states taught the Civil Rights Movement. They graded all 50 states based on what they taught regarding the Civil Rights Movement. Most states received a failing grade, including Missouri, which received a 20% in 2014. Basically, this means that there are places in the state that mention the movement, but don't teach it expressly. The organization looked at the standards that are taught within the course and painted a picture that is pretty bleak. Most states don't require the specific teaching of this time period, and it does tend to be taught at a time in the school year when teachers are testing and covering the material. Teaching tolerance would say that this is a time period that deserves some attention, regardless of the time constraints. In case you want to browse through the slides, I have included a link here for the 2011 and the 2014, as well as a statement by them regarding the importance of teaching this movement. They are long, but I think that you could skim through to find the things that work best for you in working with students and telling them why this is such an important part of our history that needs to be understood. I give you these resources to help you provide a philosophy and foundation for your students. Another reason for teaching the Civil Rights Movement at this time in our history is to show students some character traits that are necessary to be responsible students. Given all that our country has gone through in the last couple of years, I think it is valuable for students to learn some of the lessons taught by some of the important people we discuss in the Civil Rights Movement. We can't ignore all that is happening today and how it can relate to the concepts of this time period. Students need to see how nonviolence can be successful in trying to reach their goals. We also can show them that true change often takes perseverance and determination because the fight can often take a very long time. On that note, let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to accomplish with this unit. Here are the parameters that you sent me regarding the unit. You wanted to teach the civil rights movement, but you wanted to take it from the beginning aspects of Jim Crow laws all the way to the movement itself. You wanted students to understand how and why it all started and how it culminated in the civil rights movement. Lastly, you wanted to humanize it, given all that the country and the world is going through today. I love that idea, and I think we can move with that. I would like to suggest that you need to start with the history of the African Americans. Our students need to understand that the civil rights movement was just a culmination of decades of injustices to this population of people in our country. I think that also will help to drive home how the protests of today are very similar, because many of the injustices were never addressed properly and end up bringing us to the point we are today in our history. If you're able to start with the African American history and then frame it around those social injustices and how they have not been addressed, I think you could tie in some of those character traits and tie in some of the most current protests that we have today, including the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is more for the Native Americans, but it talks about protesting and looking at the injustices around this world. And if you look at Black Lives Matter, they tend to look at more than just Black lives when they're talking about the people who need to be represented due to social injustices. I think this is a great unit, and the civil rights movement is a great place to start. And I do think that you have an opportunity to move these students from where they are to where they need to be. I thought about what it is each class can do. You asked me to help you find some similarities in what all you taught that could cross over regardless of age or content. In order to do that, I believe you will need to incorporate the reading of To Kill a Mockingbird in freshman English with a variety of different texts in the sophomore American history class. Between the teachers, we can work together to find out who teaches what aspects of the movement. Given that To Kill a Mockingbird deals with the Great Depression and the beginnings of the injustices suffered by African Americans, I think looking at those concepts would work well here, to help teach some fundamental knowledge before reading the novel. Some civil rights movement can be taught here because the book was published during that time period. That may mean that the longer research projects and bigger concepts need to be taught with the social studies content. Those classes are where the students will learn about the time period, the people involved, some of the character traits, and even how all of this fits into the larger historical picture. Social studies may not read a large piece, but you will be watching a movie that will help the students to visualize one of the more important events during the civil rights movement. With that in mind, I have put together a presentation of a variety of resources that I have gathered for you that are available in our library. I have put the link to this presentation and a LiveBinder link on our library website, as well as sent you both so that you can access it at any time. I'm going to start first with some professional resources. First, I would like to start with a resource from Teaching Tolerance, one of the main places that I go whenever I talk about the civil rights movement. This is a go-to place because you want to see students truly understand how important this is in our history. The first resource is the 5 Essential Practices for Teaching the Civil Rights Movement, which I have listed here. The reason this is necessary to read for all of us is because we are all white and we just don't have the foundational knowledge to make this relatable and relevant to our students. And here these 5 practices will guide us to lead these discussions that could be controversial at times. Another source is a list that Teaching Tolerance provides. Some of these are web pages and some are lessons or activities that can be used in the classroom, while there are still others where you can send an email or postcard requesting actual units or hard copies of things. If each teacher wants something, they typically will send it to you, each requesting teacher, but once one of you has the resource, then it can be shared among all of you. The next resource I found came from the U.S. Department of State. The main reason I think this will work for you is that it explores the journey of African Americans in this country from slavery to Obama. This will give students a chance to see a big picture and how all of these events tie together to make our current history. Another thing that is great with this resource is the abundance of pictures. These are all primary sources, and this is a skill that our students need to learn. They must be able to analyze the visuals of all kinds. The last resource that will be of some help is a website full of tons of resources that can be used in the classroom. This website is all about the civil rights and how to teach it. It also includes some events that may not seem like they relate to the movement, but looking a little closer, one can see how they connect. There are examples of books, films, lessons, and oral histories. I think the oral histories will provide a chance for students to hear from those who lived it. That just adds some authenticity to what you are teaching. This would be a tool to help you find a variety of resources to add variety to the unit. Beyond websites, I also have some books and movies in the library. So here are just a few I have available to you. To Kill a Mockingbird. In this novel, it's set during the Great Depression in Alabama, where Atticus Finch is defending a black man who is accused of raping a young white woman. Atticus has two young children who are trying to put the pieces of this very intricate puzzle together. This book teaches students about childhood innocence, Jim Crow laws, racism, and right versus wrong, even if sometimes it won't matter. The next thing I want to talk about are two picture books. I believe both of these will add to your class, and even though they both are picture books and more geared towards children, they are very historical in nature and will give you the opportunity to show the students exactly what it is you need. Voice of Freedom is a picture book that talks about poetry and spirituals, gives lots of great collages to portray this civil rights fighter who looked for equal voting rights. It tells the story of the real person, and even though it's a picture book, it's definitely worthwhile for your students. Freedom Summer is a book that talks about two friends, one white, one African American. These children don't see that anything is wrong, but the rest of the world has a different response when all they want to do is play. In 1965, finally the laws are enacted in regards to the Civil Rights Act, but it takes a lot of time for change, and these two boys can't understand why. Another book that might come in handy for you is The March, Book 1. This is a graphic novel, but it is also autobiographical. It's told Senator John Lewis's story from his youth in the beginnings of the civil rights movement. It's told in graphic novel format and may reach those students who want to read this genre. It is a 3-part series that discusses Senator Lewis's life within this movement. On a side note, Book 3 just won the National Book Award this year. I've chosen 3 different nonfiction novels that I think will work for you. One talks about Daisy Bates and the Little Rock Nine. Another one talks about the Summer of Freedom and the Selma March. And another one also talks about the same Selma March. The reason I chose these 3 is because you will be watching a movie that talks about Selma, and a lot of students already know about Little Rock Nine. So these might enhance your lessons with the civil rights. The 2 movies I have selected for you are To Kill a Mockingbird, which should be an obvious choice given that you are reading the novel. And then I chose Selma. It's a movie that just came out a couple of years ago. I think it will be a great opportunity for students to see how the African American vote came to be and what they had to do in order to make sure that the Voting Rights Act took place when it needed to. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about lesson plans. I know how busy all of you are when it comes to finding new and creative ways to teach the same thing. I wanted to make sure that you had a plentiful amount for your reference. Here's just a start of what I was able to find. There's so much more out there in the world of Google. The first website is from NEA and Big Reads, and what they're talking about here is mostly To Kill a Mockingbird. Lots of great resources here. Everything focuses on theme. You have discussion, writing, and homework activities. Make sure to check that out. All of the other resources are all about civil rights, so it should help our social studies teachers quite a bit. This first resource comes from Stanford and their actual research institute for Martin Luther King Jr. This should give you a lot of different resources in that regard. The Discovery Education, of course, also talks about the civil rights movement, and it's a little different from the other sites, and the focus is not on African Americans alone, but it does focus a little bit on the government as well. You also have Teaching Tolerance, which has an organization, and then the last one is about news items. That should be about all that you need from me. Again, I want to thank you for your time. I hope that we can continue to work together and collaborate individually or as a group. I know that there are many ways that I can supplement what you are doing in the classroom. The project you are undertaking is worthwhile and large, but it is something that I think students will appreciate. I look forward to working with all of you and your students during this next unit.